So, first question is, can you talk about who Jesus is as a figure of love? Christianity, in parentheses, some, gives a perspective that is hard to absorb. Sacrifice, selflessness, but love? Question mark. So first and foremost, when I'm talking about Jesus as love, it's the feeling of the direct feeling of the presence. It's very heart-based. It's very embodied as a feeling of love. So that's the main point, like the direct experience of the actual presence. There's a emotional involvement that is much greater than I have found in any, or at least most, Buddhist masters. There's a warmth to a lot of Hindu masters, but it's not. Somehow, to me, Jesus seems very serious in a way. There's a seriousness, like a tenderness to that presence that I would say is an embodiment of love. And then if you look at the story, like the biblical story, which I did go to a Christian school for 10 years, but it's been a while, and I've tried reading the Bible a few times, but I kind of get lost in the lists of names of fathers and sons. But in the life story of Jesus, there is an openness towards everyone. There's an inclusiveness, and there's stories of him hanging out with the low parts of society. So there's no rejection there. There's an inclusiveness, and you see that as soon as the realization was there, going into the desert, having some kind of realization, it's straight out into the world. There's no holding back. Straight out talking to people, trying to bring that realization on, or pass the teachings on. And that, to me, indicates like an involvement, like an actual care there, caring about other people, which has a basis in love, the way I see it. Like that love doesn't allow carelessness. Like it's so, it doesn't feel like it allows carelessness to postpone things and to not pass on the teachings, to not show love for others. And in that, I mean, it culminates in that story of dying for other people's sins, which is a level of commitment that I don't have at the moment. And I think that there is a basis in love that is much greater than how do you say, what is pretty selfless, greater than the self. So in that way, but mostly, my experience of Jesus as an embodiment of love comes from comparing what we did in the first part of this session, which didn't include Guru Yoga, which is teasing out love as an experience, soaking in that, and then comparing that with Jesus's presence. And I find them to be to have the same quality. So two somewhat related questions. How exactly do you define a distraction? With a hard, laser-like concentrated attention, it is more difficult to hold one-pointed attention. However, with a soft focus, which includes the periphery of awareness, distraction doesn't happen. And there's a word that I can't read. I'm guessing it's like something like happen that much. If it happens, though, somehow all attention gets forgotten until noticing. Is that the actual definition of distraction? Yeah, that's what I would define as a distraction. If you get carried away completely by the thought. So I'm going to read a related question also. What if thoughts/emotions arise during Hatha Yoga? Leave them or stay with them? When to do what? So both in the way that we practice shamatha and we practice Hatha Yoga, the goal is not thoughtlessness or emotionlessness. So specifically what to do in Hatha Yoga, because Hatha Yoga is the recognition of the knowing quality of awareness. That which, not that which knows, but the quality of knowing. When sounds arise, when you actually look directly, or actually when there is clarity, seeing clearly, there is no separate sound and separate hearer. It arises as knowing that has no basis. And that's the thing. It has no shape, no form. It arises, you could say, out of nothing and fades into nothing. But the point is that it's direct knowing. And there's a sense of freedom that comes from that. And there's a sense of wonder that comes from it. And the clarity itself reveals how alive that is. But the point is that it's not a thing. It's just the quality of knowing. So, Hatha Yoga is basically recognition of that knowing. And there are certain degrees. So we speak of three different qualities, main qualities. But they aren't separated in reality. They're separated as a method because it's because it's useful for samsaric beings like ourselves to have different angles to illuminate it from different perspectives, but they are one. So when, not what if, when thoughts and emotions arise, and if there is like a stickiness to them, like there is that, if they're not seen clearly, then notice that they are known. That, like, it sounds too simple, but that's the most direct way to say it. Notice that they are known. There is knowing of thoughts and emotions, and if that doesn't clear up that stickiness, then we use PET. Because the thoughts and emotions aren't a problem at all. It's the stickiness of them. So when we say staying with them, that's the same as, because another way to put it is that when there is no stickiness to them, there is no pushing and there is no pulling. Like there's no pushing, no reason to push them away, and there is no reason to hold on to them when they're seen as baseless, formless. So when we say stay with them, it means not pushing them away. And when we say leave them, it means not pulling them in. But noticing the basic knowing of them. And yeah, so the thing with the way that we practice shamatha is that it is also a way into recognizing it. We're using a particular center in the last session. The heart can be used, the center behind or in the center of the head can be used, and other centers as well. There's a whole series of that Rinpoche taught, I think in 2016 summer retreat, which is called Vimala Mitra's Wisdom Meditations, which is available as recordings, which are all shamatha based. But the clue is that they use these centers, and it's a relaxed approach to help open the knowing, because that knowing doesn't require effort. The breath is there, and the knowing of the breath, because it's not separate from the breath, is there. I mean the sensations, the knowing of the sensations. So we use those perfect centers that don't have karma in our own, or don't have any impurities in our own system, which is to a greater or lesser extent does have those impurities. Impurities meaning that's that which causes stickiness and habits. Well, stickiness. So we use them as we apply the least amount of focus possible at any given time to first connect with them and then allow it to open up. And if it opens up at one point, if we don't need any effort, as I said, we don't need to apply any. That would be, well, a waste of effort, because when the knowing is clearly revealed, there is no distraction. Like the concept of distraction breaks apart. Does it make sense? At least a little bit.
Then it's, of course, there's a bird, and then the laser is there for a moment, or there's a thought and you notice the thought. This is not in itself the distraction when you just when you're yeah, if you narrow down, it can feel like a distraction. Oh, I'm not on the object anymore. But with the soft focus you are, and the focus on knowing, more or less, you are still on the object, even if you notice the bird and notice the thought and the emotion. Yes, the periphery is still there, the knowing.
Yeah.
So how did I understand you, and makes it clear?
Yeah, I don't know much about the practices of that include hard focus, but they seem goal, like leading to states, mind states, and then using those mind states as basis for insight. But this is directly to the basic space, basic knowing. And then, how do we know that the practice is working as intended? What are the indicators? So, so it's a kind of like there are many answers to it. In general, I would say because it can be hard to notice. Like in the if I take myself as an example, in the beginning it was easy for me to notice because of the signposts, the boomies. So in that sense, I figured, okay, so it's working as intended. And then, but as you go further along, and for me it was very like up and down in the beginning, very unstable. So it was very easy to tell when all the signposts were clear. But as they become less clear, which happened for me later, it can be hard to notice whether practice is actually working. But what I usually do then, or the basic question then is, does it still get clearer in general? Like, is that stickiness reduced somehow in general? Because there are still fluctuations. So I would say like that's a measurement. That's one measurement. Does it clear the mind? Do things get clearer or not? Looking back 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. So you get like an indicator through that. And then there are other indicators which are like less comfortable, and that can be if there's like suddenly a lot of stuff coming up, because that's a part of the practice, how it's intended as well. Because in order for that clarity to come, we have to stir things. From the channels of the energy body, and experientially what happens is that we experience the turbulence. We experience those things. So that's a more like short-term way. But if the practice isn't working as intended, I guess the effect would be that, it's hard to say because it can get temporarily muddier, or less clear. But I think that one should be able to see that in everyday life something happens, like some release is there, that it goes a little bit smoother. And for some it takes longer, for some it takes shorter. On the mat, if we look at the question from the if the practice is working on the mat, like for example Guru Yoga, if that particular practice is working, then it should be. It also fluctuates, with different cycles and stuff like that. But it should become clearer what the guru's energy is about, for example. Like, it should be easier to connect with it, and it develops in that way. That there are less distractions. So it's actually like, when I think about it, a bit, there are obvious answers to this question, and then but the question is actually quite, when you think about it, it's actually a difficult question to answer. Because like one obvious one is that the boomies, but then again, it takes longer for some and shorter for others. So I would say I'll go back to my first answer, that there should be a sense of increased clarity over time, a sense that something is working. On one level or another. That's probably not the best answer I've given, but I'll have to think about it a little bit more, I think. I might address it at a later stage of the retreat.